I was talking to my nephew who happens to have a PhD in food science, primarily in nutrition. And he was telling me that I could improve the quality of my freeze-dried eggs if I add a little bit of salt or sugar or corn syrup in with the eggs. And he's telling me that when the eggs freeze, the proteins within the yolk, and that's the yellow part of the eggs, will separate out. And when the eggs are reconstituted or when they're thawed out, the texture of the eggs kind of take on a lumpy characteristic, almost like maybe a tapioca. So we're going to put this to a test and see what happens if we add sugars or salts into the eggs prior to freeze drying, and then we're going to reconstitute them and see if the quality is substantial enough to maybe make this a permanent thing. So I've gone through and have done probably about 3 dozen eggs, and I've separated them. So I have all the shells right here, I have all the egg whites here, and right here I have all the egg yolks. And right here I have the ingredients to keep the separating from happening. So the ratios of this is you can either use 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, or 1 tablespoon of corn syrup per cup of eggs. And we'll kind of take a look to see how many eggs are actually in a cup. But before we do that, I'm going to do another test, and I'm going to add these ingredients into just 1 cup of egg yolks first and send that through and see what happens. And then we'll follow up where we will add the salt or sugars to the whole mixed eggs and see what happens there. So we're going to try it in 2 different ways. So I'm going to go ahead and add the salt and sugar. I'm not going to use corn syrup for this initial test because corn syrup is sweeter than regular sugar, and I want to make sure that that's not going to cause any problems in the final product. And one of my concerns with adding these ingredients into the eggs is it going to change the taste of the eggs after they're freeze dried? And I'm thinking, you know, since most recipes call for salt anyway, maybe salt is the best additive because maybe you don't want that extra sugar in a recipe. But anyway, we're going to take a look at that and see if adding these ingredients is going to change the quality and the taste of the eggs when they're reconstituted. So I'm going to go ahead and add this, mix these in. We're going to put it into a tray and freeze dry it and see what happens. These are my very frozen egg yolks that I have added. So this one right here has a sugar, this one right here is regular, and this one right here is salt. So I'm going to let these defrost, and then we're going to check to see if there are any lumps in here from the proteins that left the egg yolks and separated. So if everything goes right, this should have the lumps and these 2 should not. These are the 3 frozen samples of egg yolks that were frozen and then thawed and then put back in these measuring cups. So this one right here is the one that had the salt added. So we're going to pour that through a colander and see how it goes. So you can kind of see how that has gone. It's pretty much has gone through. It's pretty much liquefied. Okay, the next one is one that we added sugar to. And that has been pretty much poured through the strainer pretty easily. And finally, this is the egg yolk that had neither salt, corn syrup, or sugar added. This is the one that we're expecting to be quite lumpy because the protein separated during freezing. As you can see, it's thick and it's not pouring through the strainer hardly at all. It is very coagulated. So it's just kind of a goopy mess. So you can see that the sugar and the salt, and we didn't try corn syrup, keeps the proteins from separating from the yolks when things are frozen. So now the question is, how does it taste? How does the added sugar, corn syrup, or salt affect the taste afterwards? So we're going to go ahead and freeze and then freeze dry whole eggs with the yolk and the whites together, and then we'll do it with different sugars, corn syrups, and whatnot, and then rehydrate those and see how they taste. But it actually works. This one that was just frozen by itself is a mess. I'm sure it probably tastes just fine. Maybe you could whip this up in a mixer, but you can see that the proteins in here have definitely separated and has made this just really thick and lumpy. On to the next test. Fresh out of the freeze dryer, these are our 3 eggs. This one right here is the plain egg, just eggs by itself. This is the one that has the sugar, and this is the one that have the salt. So we're going to reconstitute these, and we're going to see, one, if we can taste the sugar or the salt that's in the eggs. Now with the salt, it's 1 teaspoon per cup. On the sugar, it's 1 tablespoon per cup. How many eggs it takes to make a cup, and then we can factor in how much salt or sugar will be in each egg. Now this egg that's plain, that became frozen, this is the one that we're expecting the proteins to separate away from the yolk, and it should become kind of lumpy. These should be nice and smooth. So we're going to go ahead and powder these up and reconstitute them and do a taste test. So I powdered the eggs. This is the plain, this is the sugar, this is the salt. So we're going to make 2 eggs each, or reconstitute the equivalent to 2 eggs, and I'm going to make scrambled eggs from them. So according to my research, it takes 2 tablespoons of egg powder. So we're going to take 4 of these all together. And then each one gets 5 tablespoons of water. And because I'm making grandpa eggs, I'm then going to add a tablespoon of milk to each other, and I'm going to cook them up with some butter. But these will all be the same. Before we scramble these up, we're going to take a look to see if these are kind of lumpy or not. So this one right here is eggs with the salt. And so that seems to pretty much go through the sieve without much of a problem. The next one is going to be the one with the sugar. And that goes through fairly easy. And then the last one, these are the regular eggs. So you can see the lumpiness of the regular eggs where the proteins have separated out of the egg yolks. I mean, they're probably still okay, but they're just kind of on the lumpy side. So now we're going to go ahead and cook the eggs up and see if we can tell the difference with the ones with the salt and the sugar, or the ones that didn't have anything. these are the 3 eggs I just cooked up. So we have the salt, the sugar, and the plain. So this is going to be the salt one, and I would just imagine that since it has salt in it, it's going to taste just fine. That tastes like a regular egg. Not a problem. It fried up just fine. I could almost make an omelet out of it. It folded very well, and it tastes really good. You would never know that this is a freeze-dried egg. Okay, so now this one right here is the one that had a tablespoon of sugar per cup, and this one over here had a teaspoon of salt per cup. So let's try the one that has the sugar in it. If I didn't know I had sugar in this, I wouldn't quite think to know what's in the egg. It's different. It's not bad. I would describe the sweetness. If milk could be sweet, this is the sweetness of these eggs. And so it's really not that bad. It's okay, but it just has that weird taste. Now, if I were going to use sugar to help preserve the protein in these eggs, I'd probably mark that with sugar. If this was used like in a cake recipe, not a problem, because cake recipes are going to have some sugar in it anyway. So I'd probably say this egg would be best suited for cooking. This egg would be best suited for eating, if you can get my drift. Okay, now this one right here, this is the egg that had nothing. Now, when I rehydrated it, you could see the goopy pieces of protein, so to speak. So we're going to try this one here. It's plain. It has really little taste. And the texture is different from these. I can kind of, the best way I can put it, the texture in this egg is not consistent. And I don't want to say it's lumpy, but I can't really put a finger on it. I'll call it, okay, it's lumpy. So you kind of can taste that this egg here, the texture is different, where these 2 eggs have a more consistent texture. This one is just a little bit different. Still good, but a little bit different. So this has been quite an interesting experiment. Would I put sugar and salt in the rest of my eggs? I probably would. I'd probably stick with maybe with the salt. I can only suppose that whoever came up with this to keep the protein from separating in the yolks probably throttled back the salt and sugar as much as they could to make sure that the taste didn't come through. I might actually play around with this and maybe reduce the salt and the sugar just a little bit and see if that changes anything, but I bet you anything it's already been done. So this was very interesting. This one was my favorite, the one with the salt, and I can definitely imagine that in my future eggs I will have the salt in there already. But anyway, you might want to try this out and give me some feedback. It was very interesting to do it. Now I probably have done 200 to 300 eggs in my freeze dryer before I did this, and so it'll be interesting as I go forth and put the sugar or the salt in here to keep the proteins from separating. And I guess what I'll do eventually, I'll see if my family likes them this way. But anyway, thank you for your time. I think you should try this and give me some feedback. And if you would, please subscribe, give me a like, and I will see you very soon. And remember, go forth and freeze dry the world. Thank you.